Hi everyone, I'm Airier, and today we're checking out Overly Sarcastic Productions' Trope Talk for Plot Twist. Now, this is something I wasn't sure I was going to do, but at the last second I decided I need to do it right now instead of anything else like Amnesia or maybe Animal Goes on a Journey, because those are things I could have done. It was what's going to be recorded all along. You guys know the deal. There's a link below to the original video. We hit it up, and let's see if there's going to be anything in here that might either count for or against plot twists. I'm going to be making a lot of Shyamalan references in this one. Be warned. They're going to be... Well, if you've seen Avatar, you already know what you're getting into. Oh, spoilers for Game of Thrones, Steven Universe, Spider-Man Homecoming, Spider-Man Spider-Verse, Terminator 2, Avengers, Captain America. There's a lot of them up there.
Oh, I'm sorry. Were you
Wait,
expecting somebody else? Well, what better way to introduce a trope talk on plot twists than with my very own plot twist?
Get out of here. I need the chair.
But I was doing a bit.
Shoot. Plot twists are kind of a hot topic
Getting
these
rid of
days,
blue right
or
off
at
the
least
bat.
they were several weeks back when
Artist rendering. I'm pretty sure she was about to say Game of Thrones. Oh, yeah, that does count as a plot twist. If it's what I think it is, the plot twist was they decided to take a great series that everyone loved and... Yeah, you could fill in the blanks on that one.
Game of Thrones ended
called
its
it.
10-year run, everyone lost their minds, and I decided to start writing this talk. For those of you viewing this in the future, when both Game of Thrones and the Polar Ice Caps are a distant, irrelevant memory, Game of
4 years ago? Yeah. You know, I think the one on the North Pole did actually completely melt this year. Oh, God, this is accurate. It did actually become a distant memory temporarily.
Thrones ran for 8 seasons, but ran out of book material after 5, leaving the showrunners to stumble through seasons 6 through 8 with only George R.R. Martin's notes to guide them. For the most part, they seem to have done an alright job for seasons 6 and 7, but general consensus is they made a bit of a mess in the final stretch.
93, 83, 30. Yeah. The Cops on Variety Hour. Why it sucks. Lindsay Ellis did a take on this? Oh, I have to check that out later. We need to talk about Game of Thrones, I guess. Yeah, that's one way to look at it.
Now, where exactly Game of Thrones went wrong is a subject for other, more invested YouTubers, preferably ones who have actually watched the show instead of absorbing the plot through GIF sets and furious Twitter threads, but I'm...
Yeah, basically how I looked at it right now. Wait, Subverting Expectations had that big of a spike in interest on Google Trends? I mean, from nothing to 100 is still a lot. Wow.
more interested in the discussion the disappointing finale sparked in both writer and fan communities pertaining to
expectation
predictability
being it
and
would be
plot
good.
twists. See, most of the characters in Game of Thrones had complex character arcs that had been following fairly understandable trajectories, and a good chunk of the fanbase pretty much assumed that after 7 seasons they could kinda see where things were going for the finale. Cersei Lannister had gone full Mad Queen, so the assumption was that her brother and noted Mad Kingslayer Jaime was going to fulfill his character arc, outgrowing their abusive relationship to do the right thing and take her out. In the process, fulfilling a prophecy that Cersei would be killed by her younger brother and replaced by a more beautiful queen. Jon Snow had been revealed to be the true heir to the Iron Throne, but this wasn't common knowledge in universe, and everyone kind of assumed his character arc would end with him killing the big scary Night King, possibly dying in the process. And Daenerys was on a pretty solid trajectory for taking the throne, possibly while pregnant with Jon's son, the true heir, additionally fulfilling some other prophecy stuff about the circumstances under which Daenerys would have another kid. It's complicated, and like I said, I didn't actually watch the show, but
I didn't either. I read the first book, realized that I just hated the characters and was hoping they would die, and then figured that was probably not the right headspace to be in. Liked how it was written, just didn't like how really good writing was portraying characters like that. Art Martin was a really damn good author, though. Complete props to the guy. That said, I heard about the plot twist here because I worked with some, let's call them significant fans of the series who made sure I was aware to the scene everything that was good or bad about the show. And it was all good until it wasn't. And I'm not just taking this out on the show because I was subjected to hearing every little flaw constantly. I'm not angry about that or how really good scenes were like, oh, that's cool, I should get into it, followed by immediately finding out as soon as I got interested that the show immediately went to shit. It was like, oh, wow, I was going to give it a second shot, and then I knew it was going to get horrible. That just kind of ruins it. I'm not angry about this at all. No, why would you say that accurately?
my god, Game of Thrones fans would not stop talking about it. I've absorbed more of Game of Thrones through pop culture osmosis than I remember from some shows I actually watched.
I've heard House of the Dragon's
point is,
good.
there were a lot of plot threads to wrap up, but most of them tied together into neat little endings that, at this point, 10 years in, everyone could kind of see coming. And then people got a little concerned when Arya Stark killed the Night King. Like, Good for her. Girl power, I guess. But this was the first hint that maybe the showrunners were deliberately trying to subvert the audience's expectations in the final stretch. Oh, you just assumed Jon would kill the Night King because they've been sharing an arc and he's basically the main character at this point? Ha! Gotcha. But then, in the last few episodes, the showrunners did two things that managed to piss everybody off. First, they made Jaime go back to Cersei, abandoning his love interest Brienne after what amounted to a one-night stand, proclaiming his love for Cersei and his general disdain for the innocent people he's made a habit of sacrificing everything to protect, and then he and Cersei get killed by falling rocks. And second, they made Daenerys go crazy and murder a city full of innocent people after she made it her life's mission to save the innocent, empower the enslaved to rise up against their masters, and break the wheel of tyranny and destruction.
Yeah. This is just dumb. It's very much the R. Martin is going to write it one way. Let's do the exact opposite so no one expects it. This is an entire thing that so many Last Jedi movies and TV shows try and do, where it's like, this is what you think is going to happen. We'll subvert it by doing something completely different because that'll make it shocking, and shocking is good. It's like, no. Shocking is good in very specific ways. But if it's just, we're doing what you don't expect, but what you don't expect is still stupid, you still did stupid. Sorry, this is just one of those things where, as an English major, I have no chill. So when it gets to bad writing, I get irrationally angry, is what I've been told. I personally believe it's completely rationally angry.
This really made people think that the showrunners were just trying to subvert the audience's expectations for shock value rather than bring the stories to a satisfying end.
Yeah, because they were! And it's definitely not the case of R. Martin, baby, told them to write something completely different than what he did because he was getting tired of people predicting his endings. And he has mentioned before that he did change how things went because people guessed what he was going to write. Which I can't confirm or deny, except I've heard that from multiple times in multiple places, including his interviews. But for all I know, he's been told to have lied in his interviews, so it doesn't really matter either way.
You expected Jaime's character arc to have some sort of dramatic conclusion, but instead we rolled back 6 seasons of character development and dropped a building on his head. You expected Cersei to get what was coming to her in some dramatic prophetic confrontation, but instead we made her comparatively sympathetic as former good-hearted Daenerys burned her city to the ground.
I mean, she did get crushed by rocks, so there's at least that part.
And we dropped a building on her head. You expected Daenerys to overcome her relentlessly terrible life and use the power and autonomy she gained to help those similarly imprisoned and used, but instead we made her go crazy and murder everybody so Jon Snow could murder her. Oh, and if you thought Jon would get to be king after finding out he's the rightful heir and everything, nope, he's going back to exile in the north for murdering Daenerys. Oh, man, we still need a king. Oh.
I mean, admittedly, Jon Snow going away when there's no Night King is probably the best ending there, but yeah.
Well, what about that psychic wheelchair kid we forgot existed for most of the season? Yeah, he'll make a fine
Only this
king.
season?
Oh, and make sure we call him Bran the Broken, because I bet the disabled members of the audience weren't expecting to feel terrible today. I like to refer to this writing technique.
Shock bait. Deliberately trying to confuse, surprise the audience no matter the cost, the quality of the narrative. A certain Star Wars movie that is literally just cut the casino out and all the issues become so much less pronounced.
As shock bait. I mean, if they wanted the heart-wrenching Mad Queen is unexpectedly killed by her grieving lover scene, they already had the perfect setup with Cersei and Jaime.
Or if they played it out that she was doing it despite her wishes, like say it's literally a curse on the family. They didn't. That kind of magic isn't really how Game of Thrones works, so it wouldn't make sense if they did, but I think that still would have been less shocking. It's like, my God, in the very last scene of the show, we reveal that there actually is a curse making them go mad. As opposed to just being generically insane assholes, which Game of Thrones is pretty good at displaying. Wow. Showing and displaying at the same time. I tried to say, wow, that's weird. Displaying it is. Decrying is what happened afterwards.
Jaime, but the point wasn't the scene, it was the shock. Yeah, I bet you were expecting this show to actually be good. Well, joke's on you. So this got people talking about plot twists and subverting expectations, because for a long time we kind of assumed they were the same thing. Oh,
when done well, they are. It's the well part that is hard to remember.
Oh, it's a twist because it surprised us. Oh, it surprised us, so what a twist. But when faced with a cavalcade of subverting expectations that somehow contained basically no effective plot twists, we all had to reevaluate what exactly they meant and why we wanted to subvert expectations at all. So what makes a plot twist a twist, and what separates it from subverting expectations?
You know, I've realized this is probably not the episode to watch, considering I'm tired, but also I'm now literally feeling rage wake me up. That's fine. I'm sure that won't lead to any weird dreams. Rage dreams about Game of Thrones and all the other movies she's dropping out there. She brought in a few of the Avengers ones. Did they even have plot twists? It probably says something about some of them that I just do not remember. Ultron, that was one of the ones in the credits.
Well, fundamentally, the difference is in focus.
Oh.
A plot twist is a story element that redirects the plot from its former trajectory. Subverting expectations is an audience impact that results from events in the story. One
Oh? I'm going to hear that again just to get her exact phrasing down.
former trajectory. Subverting expectations is an audience impact that results from events in the story. One is
Audience impact, where the plot twist is this is the change. The plot is literally twisted around, so you thought it's one way, it's going the other. Where the subverted expectation is literally you think this is going to happen, then something else did. You can understand a plot twist is coming, but a subverted expectation means you can't. And they were trying to subvert expectations and thought it was a plot twist, but there was no plot left. That doesn't help in the slightest.
cause, the other is effect, so while they're related, they're not equivalent. Now, the other reason plot twists and such were in the public consciousness so much in the first half of 2019 was the release of Avengers Endgame and the total spoiler embargo for the first week it was out in theaters.
Wait, seriously, there was? Really? I thought that's one of the few times I saw a movie pretty early on, and there were spoilers everywhere. Oh, YouTube, though. Okay, yeah, that would do it. Never mind.
This got a lot of people talking about how dumb the concept was, and a number of people put forward the opinion that if knowing the twists in advance ruins the viewing experience of a
Then
movie,
it's a
the
terrible
problem
movie
is
because you only watch
probably
it
with
once.
the movie and how it apparently has no rewatch value. I'm not saying
I mean, I'm going to flat out say that don't spoil maliciously. Oh, maliciously. I thought that said miraculous. Like, wait, that malakaliously? For some reason, the words just blend together in such a way that this font she uses is just hard for me to read. I do not get it either. I mean, I've seen my own handwriting. I can read it. It's infinitely worse than this. Well, maybe read it as an overstatement, but details aside, I'm kind of terrified what other things she's going to pull up if anything else is going to be as bad as that. Endgame was interesting,
you
though.
should spoil movies, just that this is what people were talking about because it was literally impossible to get any information about this movie.
Thanos
now, the concept
died
of a
in
spoiler
the
is
beginning.
firmly on the audience impact side of things. Spoilers don't affect the plot, aka
So it doesn't subvert the plot twist, it subverts the reaction. Oh, so it's basically the difference between this is what's happening in the story, and it's good to read through it because even if you understand what's happening, it's still well done, versus this is someone else who is reading through it, and the only joy is because they were surprised and they want to find out what happens next, as opposed to they were enjoying the twist and now it's interesting still. Yeah.
aka the cause, but they affect the audience response, aka the effect. When a plot twist is spoiled, it just tells the audience that the twist is coming, effectively turning a first viewing into a second. Spoiling a twist takes away the first impact and replaces it with a kind of suspense, not really ruining the experience, just changing it. Alfred Hitchcock's thoughts on suspense are pretty much legendary at this point. He suggests that if you show an audience a room full of people and suddenly blow it up, the audience feels a few seconds of shock. But if you show the audience a room full of people and tell them a bomb under the table will go off in 10 minutes, the audience has 10 minutes of suspense.
Oh, yeah. Which is also one of the reasons a certain movie involving a casino in space, it didn't have any suspense at all because the things, what they were trying to build suspense on didn't. And everything was just plot twist without meaning. Sorry, subverting expectation without meaning. It's surprising once, and then you realize you can skip past it.
Giving the audience information, the audience knows enough to be afraid.
And the classic one about this would be Romeo and Juliet. You know it's going to end badly immediately. And the entire movie is building up your hope that it won't.
In fact, a spoiler or a second
play.
viewing gives the audience information that turns the lead up to a plot twist into Hitchcockian suspense. By now, pretty much everyone on the planet knows that at the end of Game of Thrones Season 1, Ned Stark is killed. At the time, this was a twist. Now everybody watching Season 1 goes through it dreading what they know is inevitable. The problem I keep running into with this
I mean, I didn't know he was going to die. I just knew everyone did die, and especially when you started to like them. So, honestly, the most surprising part is that a few of the characters I like did survive, and that is still weird to me.
discussions of spoilers and subverting audience expectations and stuff is that you can only ever surprise your audience once.
Yep.
And that's cool. Getting that initial what is great, but if your end goal is just to shock them, your story kind of ends up one use only. If you tell your audience there's a bomb under the table and then one of the characters gets stabbed by a clown, you don't win because your audience is going, what? This is why the real substantial plot twists have
Oh, that's a new variation of red? Oh, neat. So the cool plot twists have more to them than raw shock value. It's kind of like gore humor. Yeah, that's a thing. It's like, hey, look at this horrible thing. Isn't that funny? No, because it's there to be shocking. I'm not going to call it shock humor because that would imply that it's humor. I have an opinion about this. It's just literally, if you don't find it shocking, if you don't find it gory and horrific and terrifying, then it's literally just stating, oh yeah, that's a thing. I don't care. It relies on the audience to have that visceral reaction. And if they know it's coming, they're not going to, so it falls on its face. It's a type of humor that I think is honestly stupid, but I've seen more and more people use it, so I am just getting depressed about that part. But I guess it's the same way in just general writing as all. No, technically it'd be true for horror more, but it fits the tropes more, so it's not nearly as insulting.
more to them than just surprising the audience on a first viewing. So, having gotten all that out of the way, let's actually talk about plot twists. Broadly, there are two major kinds of plot twists, and there's totally overlap between them. It's not a strict categorization.
So retroactive reveals unexpected info, the audience, which retroactively changes the story up to the twist. Trajectory, an unexpected event in story, bending the story away from the expected trajectory. And then you have the middle ground where it's generally good writing.
Basically, retroactive twists and trajectory twists. Retroactive twists reveal something to the audience that retroactively changes the way the story up to this point can be interpreted.
Which is, I've seen it done well, and oddly enough, one of the ways I've seen was Dune. Specifically, the new Dune movies in the 20s. Sorry, I'm just feeling horrible about the fact that I just referred to the 20s and the 2020s, and it's the same thing, and it makes perfect sense, and anyone going forward will have no problem with that. But having come from a previous century, that still feels weird to me. Oh, hey, I'm just having an old attack right now. That's the thing that's going to happen more often. Oh, wow. More importantly, though, in Dune, massive spoilers coming in, technically for a book that's over 50 years old. Longer, I know, but I'm not going to say the actual number. The first book and the first two movies that cover it lead up to this moment where Paul has the power. I basically just quote He-Man. And he sees everything, and his character almost completely changes. And they're like, oh, is he the good guy still? And the answer, no, he isn't. He's a victim. But you don't get that because the first book builds him up as someone fighting against fate. He doesn't want to become the monster. And then at the end, it's like, oh, shit, I have to become the monster. And he becomes the monster because he has no choice, is how he sees it. And he just does what he thinks is left. Giving into fate, giving into it because he's basically the destiny slave at that point. Where the later books start breaking that down and changing it retroactively so that what was initially, oh, he's awesome, followed by what's going on, I don't like this, to, oh no, it's not that he doesn't like this, it's that he didn't even have to. There is that path, but he could have broken away from fate. It's bad. Paul is supposed to be an example of a bad end. Still was really good writing, and I think when it was written, Herbert actually had issues with people empathizing how good he was and thought he was really awesome, and that was not his impression, which is why the entire series came out instead. To show, hey, here's what that was, here's how it's changing up and getting worse and worse. He still made Paul really cool, so I don't think he got his entire point across there, but in Dune Messiah, it got better. No, wait, God Emperor, Messiah is the second one. Or is it the fourth one? I honestly have been so many years. But it does change how you view the initial one initially. That sentence works, but I hate everything about it. Because it goes from, here's a cool story. He's made the sacrifice to become the Kwisatz Haderach. And then with the later books, it's, oh, shit. I'm realizing I said this is spoilers, and I'm still trying not to spoil it. But Dune is a very good example of further information changes how you view the earlier books. It's still cool, but it's more of, oh, you didn't have to do that. Which is literally the point of God Emperor of Doom. But details aside, it's a really cool way to do that retroactively. And I'm not just saying all this because I'm trying to distract myself from what I know is about to be pain.
On their own, they normally happen near the end of the story and mostly affect the rewatch value. But retroactive twists can happen at any point in the story, they'll just affect the rewatch value up to this point. A retroactive twist is usually a revelation of some kind, a new bit of information revealed to the audience and or the characters. Some of the most iconic plot twists are in this category. The Sixth Sense, Planet of the Apes, and Citizen Kane are the big ones. He Was Dead All Along and It Was Earth All Along were so popular that they're kind of generic twists by now. Although It Was His Sled All Along is a little too niche to enjoy the same popularity. A trajectory twist, on the other hand, is an unexpected event in story that radically changes where the plot is going from there. They usually happen before the final act of the story, so the plot actually has time to change. If a retroactive twist happens early enough in the story, it usually also has the same effect. The finale of Game of Thrones Season 1 gives us a trajectory twist in the form of Ned Stark's death, unceremoniously removing the presumed main character and scattering his family in disarray, leaving us on—
Honestly, I wouldn't even say presumed main character. I think he flat out was the main character. But Martin's entire thing was he wanted to do a little bit more fantasy realism because high fantasy was already done really well by Tolkien. So I like it. Let's do something different. I'm heavily paraphrasing a foreword he put into one of the editions of the book.
Uncertain of where things are going from there. In Terminator 2, relatively early in the movie, the Arnoldnator whips a shotgun out of a box of roses and tells John to get down instead of shooting him, which is when we learn that the scary Arnold Terminator is actually the good guy and the innocuous policeman Terminator is actually a really scary bad guy. This tells us straight out that T2 isn't going to be like the first Terminator. This time, the bodyguard figure isn't a squishy human soldier, but is instead the indestructible metal badass that was trying so hard to kill them. And this one—
It was actually really cool. It's hard to consider this a plot twist, though, because for the same reason The Sixth Sense and Planet of the Apes are just generic at this point, everyone knows them because they did so well. Everyone knows the twist of Terminator 2, and surprisingly, very few people know much about Terminator 1. And that's because Terminator 2 is objectively just a much better movie. I've seen most of them up until, was it Salvation? And then I was like, oh, okay, I've seen enough.
It's not going to be horror, it's going to be all action, baby. By the way, looping back to the spoiler discussion a little, I was unsurprisingly spoiled about this particular twist before seeing the movie since it came out in 1991. But the interesting thing is that while knowing it in advance removes some of the oomph from the scenes when Arnold whips out the shotgun, it basically reframes all the scenes leading up to it to be seen from the Terminator's perspective instead of John's. Watching it thinking the Terminator's trying to kill John puts us in his head as he tries to get away, but knowing the Terminator's trying to protect him puts us in the Terminator's head as he tries to catch up to him before the T-1000 does. It's exactly as tense because even though we know the Arnoldnator isn't the threat, we're aware of stakes that John doesn't know about yet. Anyway, a lot of plot twists are both retroactive and trajectory twists. There's a big twist in Spider-Man Homecoming, where as Peter's getting ready for prom, he learns
this one I
that
did
the
see,
Vulture
actually.
is actually his girlfriend Liz's dad. This is a retroactive twist as it reframes every scene where the Vulture discusses his family and the bits where we see Liz and her mom, but it's also a trajectory twist as it leads to the Vulture finding out Peter's secret and kicks Peter back into action as Spider-Man.
And doing one of the few things that Marvel has struggled with, making interesting villains who they don't just kill off and then drop. Literally, it's a problem. Yeah, he was awesome. He did a great job. It's one of the few villains like, you know what, this is just a good movie. Yeah, it wasn't like great. I wouldn't like say it's the one you had to go and see immediately. It was like, you know what, I'm fine with owning a copy of this. Yeah. Never saw anything after Endgame, and I've been told that was the right decision. And that's depressing.
Steven Universe has a similar character reveal twist where midway through the 5th season, Steven learns that his mother, the heroic rebel Rose Quartz, was actually the tyrannical pink diamond she was supposedly rebelling against. This reframes 5 whole seasons of stories about Rose Quartz, Pink Diamond, and the rebellion as a whole, and also reframes our image of Pearl, who knew the whole time but was physically compelled to keep it a secret. But it also radically shifts—
Oh, I didn't know the compelled part. That is actually way more fucked up. I heard the spoiler about who she was the entire time. I did not know the compelled part, which makes it less I'm the mother's follower, which is what I thought was going to, more I literally have no choice in the matter, for my God says jump. That's kind of fucked up. Yeah, I do know the entire thing about Steven Universe is it's basically like, here's a cute show about a kid who's kind of an idiot and just growing up, followed by, hey, we're just going to break him by the end, and he's kind of just scarred for life and kind of just in a sad, depressed place. I've been told that's basically where it goes. I've also heard they've made or started to announce they're doing a continuation of it where he's either further as a teenager or an adult, young adult. So I don't know if that's true or not. It might be interesting to start from an admittedly broken point.
the focus of the plot, as now Steven is determined to stop the conflict with the other diamonds, fix the damage from the Gem War, and do what his mother couldn't in either of her identities. I want to real quick put a spotlight on Into the Spider-Verse, because it had a bunch of plot twists that were all very different and all handled very well. In the trajectory twists category, the big one is the death of Peter Parker, which happens super early in the movie. They give us this
Considering I haven't seen this movie, that actually is a surprise to me.
perfect Spider-Man in his absolute prime.
I mean, to be fair, if Miles Morales isn't there, wasn't he based on the idea that Spider-Man died? So it's not really a spoiler, but whatever.
And right after he promises Miles to help and mentor him in his new abilities, he dies. Miles spends the rest of the movie struggling to find another mentor who can help him get a handle on his powers and trying not to crumble under a mountain of expectations, things he wouldn't have had a problem with if Peter had survived to train him. Most of the other twists are character reveals, which you could consider to be a subcategory of the overlap between retroactive and trajectory twists because they give you new information about a character that makes you see them retroactively in a new light, but also usually changes how they behave going forward. And it's
One of the classic ones here would be Han Solo. Not that he's a villain, but that at the very end he came back showing that he's a scumbag with a heart of gold, as opposed to the scumbag who abandoned him. And it's like, okay, yeah, we kind of figured that. Oh, shit, he's here. It's old. If that's a spoiler, I am so sorry. It's actually a great scene.
It's really fun because the movie explicitly anticipates that its audience knows who Spider-Man is, how he works, and what his bad guys are. We know about Green Goblin, Doc Ock, Kingpin, Tombstone, Scorpion, whatever. And we see Ultimate Green Goblin very early on. Plus, during Peter Parker's intro monologue, we get a flashback glimpse of Doc Ock throwing a car at him. So because the movie expects the audience to know who Spider-Man's villains are, we're anticipating for Doc Ock a portly scientist dude with a bunch of robot arms and some scary shiny goggles, because that is what Doc Ock always looks like. And instead, it turns out that this quirky hipster scientist lady we already saw in a school presentation is the Earth 1610 Doc Ock, and as a bonus, she's packing more supervillain panache than the rest of the crew put together. Bonus points, the reveal is immediately preceded by Peter B. Parker thinking he needs to re-examine his personal biases when he learns the head scientist is actually a lady instead of a portly dude hunched over a computer with some scary shiny goggles. Cheeky. We also get the much less fun Prowler reveal later on, which wasn't a surprise to anyone who was familiar with the Ultimate Spider-Man comics, but I didn't know it going into the movie, and even if it doesn't surprise you, it still impacts because Miles is so affected by it.
I actually haven't seen a lot of the Ultimates. I've heard of it, but honestly, a lot of that would be completely surprised to me.
Has been looking for a mentor figure all movie. Even before he gets his powers, his intro shows us that he and his dad are already drifting apart due to the high expectations he puts on Miles. Then after Perfect Peter dies, he tries our Peter, but Peter B isn't exactly mentor material. None of the other Spider people are interested in actually helping him because they're on a bit of a schedule and don't have time, and after a string of crushing disappointments, Miles goes to find the one person who always supported his actual interests, his Uncle Aaron, artsy, independent, rebellious, suave, and fun. And then it turns out Uncle Aaron is the supervillain Prowler who's been hunting him since Perfect Peter died. Obviously, Aaron didn't know he's been trying to kill his nephew, but all Miles cared about is that the only person he felt he could trust has actually been trying to murder him the whole time. Even though we know what's coming, I'd say especially if we know what's coming, the writer preserves the tension and the impact is extremely effective.
Damn. I mean, I know there are spoilers going into this. I'm still going to watch the movie, but I'm going to have the exact same thing. It'll be like a second viewing, which admittedly doesn't bother me. I rewatch things I enjoy all the time. But that is really kind of fascinating then. Dude, I need to watch this movie. I need to. Eventually the second one will come out, and if it's already out, well, that shows how behind I am.
These are all twists that are fun on the first viewing and better on the second viewing. If you know the scientist lady is Doc Ock, you notice her octagonal glasses or the spare tentacle parts on her desk. If you know Aaron is the Prowler, you understand Miles' dad's disappointment in him and why he doesn't want Miles hanging around him too much. If you know Peter's gonna die, watching him swing around quipping without a care in the world hurts a lot more. But these are...
Oh shit, that's gonna break me. You know, if you hadn't pointed that out, I wouldn't have thought about it because I'm fairly good at ignoring things. That's not going to be ignorable now. It's like I'll be like, because I know he's going to die. I don't know which part he's going to die in now, though, just early on. Oh, God, this movie's going to hurt me in ways I wasn't expecting now. Lovely. Example of a good plot twist. Because even though I know it's going to happen, it doesn't make it any less interesting. Unlike another spoiler that is completely going to happen right now, where part of the plot line for the Miles Morales intro was, oh, it was actually Doc Ock in Miles' body. Or was it Doc Ock in the original Parker body? Honestly, I forget. It was a stupid twist and I ignored it.
Are good twists. Effective, well-written, good. Let's talk about what makes a bad twist. Broadly, a plot twist is bad, or at least ineffectual, if it ticks one of these boxes.
Okay, that last one isn't just a plot twist. If you do something that contradicts canon, that's not bad. That is, you have to earn the shit out of that. For example, Nazu for Fate, the Fate franchise Type Moon, Nazu, the guy who created it, has gone out and said to a lot of the people, do what you want, make your own rules, but make them consistent. So you can break rules and break canon, but you have to be internally consistent with how you break it. And then they'll just figure it out going forward. But that level of consistency gives you leeway to then break canon. Where if you just randomly do it out of nowhere, it kind of highlights you just randomly did it out of nowhere. There's a lack of thought behind it. You were probably just fucking around. It's that level of thought that becomes apparent to the point where if you are actually aware of it, you've already failed. Isn't as clever, more boring, has no meaningful impact. Yeah. Yeah,
The
they're all
twist
just bad writing.
contradicts canon or makes no sense. The twist isn't as clever as it thinks it is. The twist is less interesting than the untwisty natural progression of the plot, or the twist has no meaningful impact. Let's break these down one by one. The twist
They're bad writing, they're bad writing, they're bad writing, and they're bad writing. If any of those things are there, it doesn't even matter if it's twist. They're just bad, and you should avoid them regardless if you're trying to write a plot twist or not. It's just people have, the result of shock bait writing. Yeah. A lot of people confuse that with good writing because they believe horror, the gore, and the terrifying moments of it are the be-all, end-all of writing. If you can do that, you can do anything. And it's like, no, those aren't good. People will come back to them because they like how gruesome they are, not because they like being scared. Because once you know what's going to happen, you're not going to be scared. Some people actually get into it. I'm saying this as someone who's absolutely terrified of anything, no matter how many times I see it, so I'm not exactly the best person to say that, but all the same, if you know the twist, you know the twist. It's not going to be nearly as scary to anyone who's not me.
twist contradicts canon or makes no sense. This is the easy one. If the twist actively clashes with the rest of the story, the twist is bad. And even if it doesn't clash, if you think too hard about it and it stops making sense, that's not good either. The remake of Planet of the Apes where Mark Wahlberg makes it back to his own time, but now the Lincoln Memorial has a monkey face, that's just confusing and makes no sense.
They never made another one because of that. Yeah. Or at least I don't think they ever did. I don't believe the new remakes of Planet of the Apes or Rise of are related to this or not. Be really weird if they were.
What exactly is it trying to say here? Bad twist. The twist isn't as clever as it thinks it is. If the twist is predictable, simple, or just kind of whatever, then the amount
Honestly, this you could file under writer has their head up their ass syndrome.
of weight the author puts on it can be distractingly self-indulgent. If the twist isn't actually that twisty or profound, it can be kind of uncomfortable to watch the author go all, oh, isn't it so smart? I bet you didn't see this coming.
I don't know what clip she's about to pull out, but I already know I'm going to hate it because I'm going to understand and agree with her. And it's going to suck.
This problem with a lot of the later episodes of Sherlock, but let's hit some low-hanging fruit here and make fun of Signs, where the big twist is that the monsters are deadly allergic to water.
You know, the thing that 80% of our planet is covered with and regularly falls from the sky on the rest of it? Just throwing it out there. I mean, if you had a squirt gun or a hose or you aggressively bled on them.
That's not a very complicated twist, and also it'd be like if a bunch of humans went to a world where it's mostly covered in and actively rains lava and were shocked to discover that we caught fire. They're not
I mean, admittedly, we probably would do that, so maybe it's not unrealistic.
even wearing suits. Bad twist. The twist is less interesting than the untwisty natural progression of the plot. This one might actually be a little
Also, yes, that was one of the Shyamalans. So far, that's the first time I mentioned Shyamalan. I thought this would be a lot more of it.
controversial, but if the plot twist results in something more boring than the non-twist version, that's not good. Any story where the twist is that radical, fantastical adventure was actually all a dream or drug-induced hallucination.
Considering we just did all a dream, and we got some good examples. I still believe, though, that those are not the main usage of it. Most all a dream is because people fucked up and they wrote themselves into a corner. That is, in many ways, the way it is used. Some people do better. I've heard Over the Garden Wall was one of the examples, and it's really well done. Is it magic? Is it real? It was a death dream, but at the same time, it also might have happened. So maybe it was your mind going to a different world. I don't know. And apparently it was very confusing because I wasn't entirely sure which one was which. But that was great usage of it. And then there's every other fucking one. I pulled up the Windfish, and mostly because I just remembered at the end, it's like, oh, everything I did is kind of over and didn't really matter at the end to it myself and my character. But the internal drama of everyone I know kind of disappeared because of my actions. It was I guess it's a plot twist that you see coming and reframes your actions. You're not saving the world, you're destroying it. But also, once you do, you're kind of left in the, well, I'm still shipwrecked, and it seems like the filler episode was a well-written filler episode, but still a filler episode style game. I personally have my headcanon that this is what happened between Link to the Past or Majora's Mask, or just one of the other games, or maybe even just Twilight Princess and something. I don't really know at this point. I just make up games to say Majora between something else. Is it real? No, of course not. But I still like to believe it.
The nation falls into this category. So does the ending of Game of Thrones, where the big twist was everyone's character arcs ended badly. Bad twist. The twist has no meaningful impact. This is really the biggest one. If the twist has almost no consequences, what was the point? The most important characteristic of a plot twist is right in the name. It has to twist the plot. If it just jiggles it a little, then whatever. I have a favorite good-bad example here that manages to tick every box. So let's circle back to my old favorite punching bag, Age of Ultron.
I'll be honest, the only thing I remember out of this movie is that Hawkeye had some good quips, and that's the most screen time he's ever really had.
Specifically, the bit where Quicksilver dies.
Oh, yeah,
See,
that
Age
was
of Ultron spends basically the whole movie trying to convince us that Hawkeye's gonna die. He gets injured early on.
Really? Honestly, I didn't get that vibe from him at all. I got the I'm too old for this shit as it's just general humor. Oh, I just didn't read that then.
Sarcastically announces he's gonna live forever, and we learn he's got a secret family with a loving pregnant wife and 2 adorable kids, and he stares at a picture of them before heading into the final battle. Then, when he runs into danger...
I mean, admittedly, I thought he wouldn't be in danger because they would just leave him so far behind. He wasn't close enough to anything to kill him. Which, admittedly, is actually closer to accurate than not.
To rescue a kid and gets attacked by a gunship, Quicksilver zips him behind a car, gets riddled with bullets, says, "You didn't see that coming," and dies. Couple problems, and by a couple, I mean, wow. So, category 1, the twist makes...
I mean, yeah, the twist being he got hit by the bullets, even though he can move so fast he could just knock them out of the air because he's still moving faster than them. So he's literally just deciding to commit suicide at that point.
Makes no sense. The movie shows us that Quicksilver is fast as hell. I have no trouble believing he could get Hawkeye to safety. But I do have trouble believing he couldn't also get himself to safety.
Or just move the bullets.
Carry Hawkeye most of the way to the car and then push him while he was still in the open? That seems kind of unsafe at those speeds. It makes more sense that he carried him behind the car, but then why was Quicksilver still out in the open to get shot? The movie doesn't convince me that Quicksilver had to die, and in fact gives me reason to believe he's absolutely fast enough to not die in this...
I was personally expecting they had some kind of design with the actor, and they're just like, you know what, we don't like you enough, we're getting rid of you. Because the alternative is they're just starting to show future Marvel levels of writing. Yeah. I don't know who on writing staff thought of this, but they probably had a very long career in Marvel, and everyone who was like, maybe this isn't a good idea, probably isn't there anymore. Not a joke, just an unfortunate observation that I may or may not have someone in the comments tell me was accurate, and I'm terrified of when that happens.
Specific situation. We've seen what bullets look like to him, and it's pretty embarrassing for him to go out like a punk when barely a year earlier, Days of Future Past showcased exactly what a speedster like Quicksilver was capable of. Not a great look. Category 2, the twist isn't as clever as it thinks it is. When your plot twist looks directly into the camera and cheekily says, "You didn't see that coming," please just stop and maybe fire your writers. More importantly,
I actually forgot he said that altogether. I'll be honest, I didn't even remember he died in this. I thought he just got put on a bus. Admittedly, he did, but it made so little of an impact. Age of Ultron was the worst Avengers movie, I'm pretty sure.
yeah, I did see it coming, and so did a lot of people. See, when you give us a lot of really obvious death flags on an important character, but then introduce a bunch of disposable new characters, it's not hard to assume that you're faking us out. Vision
I mean, my biggest surprise is that she lived. I thought they were just going to kill off both of them.
and Wanda are famous for their relationship in the comics, so they
That I didn't know, so that's probably why I believe that. I had no idea about that.
were both out of the death running, which just leaves us with Quicksilver, whose arcs are mostly centered on things like Magneto and the X-Men, aka stuff Marvel doesn't have the rights to.
Which would be why they got rid of him, because they had no source material to draw from rather than just doing something original. Yeah, that would be a thing.
Yeah, it wasn't hard to see that one coming. Category 3, the twist is less interesting than not having the twist. I want you to picture, for a moment, a world where Quicksilver existed for the events of Civil War, Infinity War, and Endgame.
Actually, he would probably be the perfect person to say, I'm just not dealing with this, and fuck off. So he probably wouldn't really affect it that much. until they had a plot line to get him in which case that might have a very different ending.
He'd already started outgrowing his angry, jaded personality and had begun recognizing the Avengers as heroes, seeing them do their absolute damnedest to save Sokovia from a problem he indirectly helped cause. He started off hating Tony, but changed his mind to side with him instead, recognizing that all Tony wanted was to fix the problems he caused. So if Quicksilver survives Age of Ultron, he becomes an Avenger, most likely just as fiercely loyal to them as he was to Ultron, just in time for them to tear themselves apart in Civil War. Say he sides with Tony, seeing the Accords as just another step in Tony's journey away from being the weapons dealer
Admittedly, I think that would actually be kind of fascinating because I think he would be the one to take the neutrality path of I'm not dealing with this.
he hated. It puts him in opposition against his sister, the first time they've really fought, and it would be cool to see them fight, even if it probably wouldn't last long. Say he survives the snap in Infinity War, the first time he's separated from his sister.
Ooh,
the way they played out Endgame, during those 5 years, there were almost no active supers on the planet. Thor was getting drunk and Hulk was getting therapy, but
Admittedly, I liked that twist. But just the entire thing of Thor absolutely breaking and then finding out he was still worthy was a plotline I kind of liked. Because it was someone who you never see breaking. And it was more serious. I kind of wish they didn't play it up nearly as much of a joke, but that's kind of the way their writing was heading towards every way. I'll be honest, I like the amount of humor they had in the first Thor movie for him, where there was humor, but they had a lot more quiet moments by comparison to later Marvel movies, which were trying to be comedies and not succeeding as being as funny as when they weren't and trying to be a superhero movie still.
I don't see Quicksilver taking
Personal
Armageddon
opinion.
lying down. He could be doing his damnedest to keep the peace Flash style, maybe even clashing with Hawkeye's one-man vigilante crusade, a narrative foil situation, each of them responding to the loss of their family in very different ways.
Yeah.
Maybe he's doing for Earth what Captain Marvel is doing for the rest of the galaxy, desperately running around keeping things working while the rest of the team searches for a real solution because he's the only one with the powers to do it. Then Wanda comes back after the snap and suddenly there's a 5-year age difference between these twins. Wanda's still mourning Vision, Pietro's just happy she's alive, and my god, the emotional baggage they could unpack there.
Admittedly, if they decide to reboot the universe, and let's be honest, it's happened so many times in the comics, it'll probably happen in the movie because they've jumped the shark so many times now. Hell, that'd actually be the most canon compliant thing they could possibly do now that I think about it. That would be an interesting way to restart it. Oh, wait, I think that actually is happening because they're acknowledging the purchase of the X-Men into Disney with Deadpool. Huh. I've heard the Deadpool movies are fun. I might still go check those out.
So much potential here, but Age of Ultron wanted a death and Pietro was available, so sucks to be him. Bad
Yeah.
twist. Category 4, the twist has no meaningful impact. You guys
Yep.
notice nobody liked Quicksilver? Literally nobody but Wanda, and his death just made her kill Ultron bots slightly faster than she already was. Quicksilver dies, Hawkeye lives, the cast expands by 2 instead of 3, nobody mourns, nobody gets a funeral, nobody cares. Hawkeye grimaces sadly for a couple minutes, and then everyone puts on their dark, serious pants for Civil War, and I'm pretty sure they don't even mention him in Civil War. So broadly, there
I
are a
don't think
number
they
of
ever got
ways to
mentioned
screw
again.
up a plot twist. Writers often equate writing a twist with shockbait, but they really aren't the same thing, and in the struggle to surprise the audience, the writer can sometimes just disappoint them instead, which
I do wonder, though, how much of that is not so much that the writer is bad, but that the writer is on a deadline. For a novel, sometimes you have more time to work through that, so it's not as much of an issue. If you've taken a advance and you have a deadline to get it done, that's not the case sometimes. But that's not so common anymore, or even really a possibility outside of a few people named Patterson. So it's not always an issue. But in anything film or TV related, you have very hard deadlines. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the reason shockbait is there is because it's easy to write. And they assume people are going to see it once and that's the end of it. They only need it to function once. They're not going for the more long-term rewatch value because that's not their initial aim. They're there for opening weekend numbers, opening box office numbers. And if it happens to be bad a week or 3 weeks or 3 years or 3 decades later, I don't care because I'm not assuming I'll get residuals for it. I don't know if they get a significant amount after that. I'm assuming they do, but I'm not sure how that's broken up anymore. I assume they do, but I just don't know what the numbers would be.
which can be surprising, but still not good. Trying to micromanage the audience's reaction to something is never a good idea. All you can do is control the story, not the way they react to it. There's a reason tropes exist. Just because a story element is a known quantity doesn't mean it's not compelling, and just because
Oh God, I'm so glad you highlighted this. Tropes are not bad. It's kind of like something that's cliche. It's cliche because it works. Also, I'm not sure if that's coming out on script, but apparently my entire power system is about to shut off. What the hell? Well, why is my screen shutting off? Okay, that's going to be a thing. That is not good. I think I stopped it. Weird. More importantly, it's the idea that a trope is bad. It's that a cliche is bad. If it's handled well, it's good. It became a cliche because it made sense. It actually fit. It had a purpose, and it was well done. Cliches are bad when people just do them because they think they have to, or they do it without realizing why. When you take out the thought and just do the thing that seems easy. Like shock bait and calling it a plot twist, and then plot twists become cliche, but that's just... It's a level of skill and a very big interpretation of it.
Because your audience can see something coming doesn't mean the story isn't still good. Maybe
Yep.
we should all stop freaking out about spoilers so much. Good stories have rewatch value.
That's the problem, though. A lot of things don't have that because they're there for the first viewing. If movies were made to be viewed multiple times, they'd be a lot harder to write for. And admittedly, considering if you have a full-time job at a minimum wage location, you're making slightly more than writers were for most of the last decade. There were writing jobs that were full-time, where you might get a few episodes out of a TV show or a movie, and some of the writers were being paid $34,000 a year. Yeah. Was that all of them? No. But that was a possibility for some writers. Starvation level wages were a possibility. And considering Hollywood's in California, near Los Angeles, where money is very, very low key and no one is in any way, shape, or form going to be squeezed there. Yeah. Actually, when you put it that way, it makes a lot more sense that they half-ass it, considering they were probably trying to find another full-time job on top of their other full-time job on top of their other full-time job. I know that things were renegotiated in later contract agreements, but for the long time, writers basically got screwed. I'm pretty sure they're still getting screwed, but I don't know the exact levels anymore, so I can't say for sure.
Stories are good even if someone summarizes the whole story first. Plus, I always get really happy when my audience can guess where my story's going because it means I'm doing my job right and getting my
Leading
plot
up to the
across
point you
without
want.
confusing anyone. Isn't that the whole point? So yeah.
And that was our weekly dose of Airier gets mad at agreeing with Red about points that are really good and would make a lot of sense if anyone could actually portray them well. That thing I enjoy doing to myself every week when it comes to Red talking about tropes, because I love this. I'm enjoying myself right now. Ignore the anger and the sheer fact that my face is becoming increasingly red because I am literally repressing all the times I want to shout, "You dumb shits fucked it up!" Because I would never do that. This is a very family-friendly channel. I do not swear here. Minus all the other times, ignore those. Yeah. I brought up a specific movie about the Jedi. Maybe it was the last one or something. I don't remember. It didn't matter too much. And I think when they went for shock humor, moving around, showing a bunch of scenes that is like, oh, this is going to happen, then this is going to happen, then this is going to happen. Ha, you weren't expecting that. Ha, you weren't expecting that. Ha, you weren't expecting that. Back to back to back to back to back. It proved nothing mattered. You can cut it out of the movie. A director's cut shortening it would be better because there were things that if they just took more time to stand on would have been really good. Maybe not the best, maybe not everyone's cup of tea, but they would be rewatchable. And then you get to the casino in a specific movie and everything up until the ending where you're on planet, and it doesn't matter at all. Completely and utterly meaningless shock value of, oh, wow, you'll never expect this. This is a surprise. Plot twist. Except it wasn't. And it fell into everything she just outlined. I swear, if I wasn't absolutely aware that so many writers were literally just barely able to survive and they're trying to pump out as much work as they can to get to another job where they can get a little more to survive, because writing for TV and movies is shit for a lot of places, I would feel worse about this. Nope, wait. Flop that around. I do feel worse about it. it's not something that would cover here. It's still an example of bad writing, but it might be bad writing under stress. Sometimes. I don't know how much Disney falls into that with some of their properties. I don't know how their payment structure is. I do know that a lot of movie and film crews don't have good compensation if you're not someone they needed to negotiate to get. But that's just, yeah, it's just a thing. Again, hoping that was changed. Don't know if it was. Hoping. Yeah. More importantly, if you haven't already, link below video, hit it up. And if for some reason Red went over just the background scenes leading into some of the tropes and how they were played out between good and bad options, that's probably a detailed diatribe at this point. And I've been told repeatedly I need to get into that because it sounds like it would be amazing. And I agree because I need to. I need to get around to that. I really do. Either way, I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios.